A German flashlight swept across a captured foxhole. 2 American soldiers lay beside a silent Browning machine gun. One was dead. The other was 20-year-old Gino Merli, and he had to make the Germans believe there was no difference. A soldier stepped closer. A bayonet pressed into Gino's flesh. Every nerve in his body demanded the same thing. Move, flinch, breathe. He did none of them. The patrol turned away. Then the dead man opened fire. That is the part of Gino Merli's story people remember. But the real story is not that he rose from a foxhole and fired. It is how much had already been stripped away before stillness became his final weapon. Gino Joseph Merli came from Scranton, Pennsylvania, a city built on anthracite coal and the bodies of men who went underground to bring it up. He was born in 1924, the son of an Italian immigrant family in a working town where survival rarely looked dramatic. It looked like showing up. It looked like carrying weight. It looked like finishing the job when nobody was watching. In July of 1943, the Army took that coal country discipline and placed it behind a Browning M919A4. The gun weighed more than 30 pounds before ammunition, tripod, and spare equipment. It was not elegant. It was a crew-served machine built to hold ground. The gunner aimed and fired. The assistant kept the ammunition moving, watched the weapon, and helped the crew survive long enough to matter. A good team could turn an open road, a hedgerow gap, or a village approach into a place infantry could not cross. A bad team announced its position and died there. Gino proved steady with the gun, not flashy, not loud, steady. He joined the 18th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, an outfit that had already fought through North Africa and Sicily before preparing for France. To veterans, replacements were unfinished men. They had not yet learned the sounds. They did not know which whistle meant incoming artillery, which shadow meant movement, or how quickly a raised head could become a casualty. Gino arrived as one more young soldier who had not yet been tested. Then came Omaha Beach. On June 6, 1944, the 18th Infantry landed after the first assault waves had struck the German defenses. By the time Gino reached the beach, the sand and surf had already become a landscape of wreckage, smoke, and bodies. The invasion plan had not survived first contact. Men moved because stopping in the open meant dying there. Gino crossed that beach, climbed away from it, and entered the long fight through Normandy. After Omaha, the veterans no longer needed anyone to explain whether the replacement could hold his nerve. He had already carried a machine gun through a place designed to kill him, but Normandy taught a harder lesson. Courage was not one moment, it was repetition. One hedgerow, one field, one burst of fire. One friend missing at the next roll call, then another hedgerow, then another. By late summer, the Allied armies had broken out of Normandy and raced toward Belgium. Paris had been liberated. German units were retreating. The map made it look as if the war had finally begun to collapse. The ground told a different story. Supply lines stretched. Units outran support. Enemy formations that looked broken from headquarters could still gather in darkness, attack a weak position, and destroy the men holding it. That was the war Gino entered near Sars-la-Bruyere on September 4, 1944. A small Belgian village, a road, a defensive position. A machine gun aimed toward the most likely approach. Nothing about the place looked historic. That is usually how history looks before men begin dying in it. The first warning came after dark. Shapes gathered beyond the position. Then rifle fire broke the night open. The attack was not a patrol feeling for a weakness. It was a superior German force driving directly into Company H. The American line bent. Then parts of it broke. Men were forced back. 8 members of Gino's section were captured. His assistant machine gunner was killed. The crew-served weapon became a one-man position, and Gino stayed. Machine gunners are often the last men ordered to move. Their job is to keep the enemy's head down while everyone else pulls away. It sounds tactical when written on paper. On the ground, it means one man keeps firing at the exact place every enemy rifle is searching for. Gino understood that. He also understood what would happen if the gun stopped too soon. The retreating Americans behind him would be exposed. So the Browning kept hammering. The muzzle flashed against the darkness. The belt ran forward. Brass fell around the receiver. German soldiers dropped or flattened against the ground. The assault slowed, then shifted, then came again. Gino moved his fire across the approach, not wasting rounds on darkness, but cutting at movement when it appeared. The gun was doing what it had been built to do. Hold a lane, buy seconds, make numbers hesitate. But a machine gun cannot cover every direction. And one man cannot feed ammunition. Watch the flanks, manage the weapon, and stop an enemy force forever. The Germans entered the position. At that moment, Gino lost the advantage of fire. The Browning could no longer save him. Movement would reveal him. Resistance would end in a bullet or a blade. Surrender might not even be offered, so he changed weapons. He became still. He collapsed beside the dead assistant gunner and let the captured foxhole tell the Germans a simple story. The gun crew was finished. A patrol came close. Flashlight beams moved over the bodies. German soldiers checked the position. A bayonet jabbed Gino. Pain arrived before thought. The body has its own language when steel enters flesh. Muscles contract. Breath catches, the face changes, the smallest reaction can betray life. Gino refused every word of that language. He let the patrol see only what it expected to see. 2 dead Americans, an abandoned gun, a position already won. The Germans moved on. Gino waited until distance replaced certainty. Then he reached for the Browning. The position came alive behind them. Men who had walked past a corpse were now taking fire from it. The attack stalled in confusion. Gino fired while he had a target. Then before the enemy could close again, he dropped beside the assistant gunner and returned to stillness. That was the cycle. Fire when the enemy exposed itself. Disappear when they closed. Turn pain into silence. Turn silence into surprise. He was not pretending to be fearless. Fearless men are careless. Gino was doing something harder. He was controlling fear so completely that the enemy mistook discipline for death. The official account of the action describes him continuing this resistance through the night, firing when he could, and feigning death when German soldiers approached. It was not a single clever trick. A trick works once. This was endurance. Each return to the gun made the next check more dangerous. Each burst told the Germans someone was still alive in the position. Each period of silence forced Gino to wonder whether the next patrol would shoot the bodies instead of testing them. And beside him lay the assistant gunner who had shared the weapon until a bullet ended his part of the fight. Gino could not move him, could not mourn him, could not even separate himself from the body. The dead man became part of the deception that kept the living one alive. That is the darkest part of the story. Not the bayonet, not the blood, the intimacy of survival. Gino had to use the stillness of his dead comrade as cover. He had to lie beside him, feel the enemy step close, then rise and fire because men farther back were still depending on the seconds he could buy. War often turns virtue into something unrecognizable. Loyalty becomes staying at a gun. Courage becomes refusing to breathe. Friendship becomes not leaving the body beside you, because leaving it would expose you both. The night stretched on. The Browning fired less often as targets disappeared and ammunition mattered more. The battlefield became a pattern of darkness, movement, silence, and sudden violence. The Germans could not tell what remained in front of them. A squad, a second gun, a hidden American position that had not collapsed. They knew only that every time they treated the foxhole as dead, it punished them. By dawn, the meaning of the position had changed. The Germans had attacked it as a weak point. Gino had turned it into uncertainty, and uncertainty can stop men almost as effectively as bullets. When American forces counterattacked the next morning, the enemy asked for a truce. Across the battlefield lay 52 German dead. 19 were directly in front of Gino's gun. Those numbers matter, but they are not the full measure of what happened. The result was not one man defeating an army. It was one isolated gunner refusing to let a broken position become an easy road through the American line. He covered men who were withdrawing. He disrupted an assault. He created enough resistance, confusion, and cost that the enemy never received the clean victory it expected. And he was still alive when his own side returned, covered in blood, wounded by bayonet thrusts, beside the assistant gunner who had not returned with him. Afterward, the army recommended Gino Merli for the Medal of Honor. On June 15, 1945, President Harry S. Truman placed the medal around his neck at the White House. The citation honored his courage, but Gino never treated the foxhole as a one-man legend. He remembered the assistant gunner. He remembered the men forced to withdraw. He remembered that the enemy soldiers in front of him were also human beings caught inside the same machinery of war. Accounts of his life describe a young man who wanted to pray after the battle, not only for Americans, but for the Germans who had died there. That detail does not weaken the violence of the night. It makes it heavier. Mercy after safety is easy. Mercy while surrounded by the consequences of your own survival is something else. Gino returned home with the highest military decoration in the United States. Then he did something far less cinematic. He went back to school. The young man who had crossed Omaha Beach and survived the foxhole in Belgium sat in classrooms and completed the education war and poverty had interrupted. There was no crowd waiting for that victory. No president, no citation. Just assignments, examinations, and the quiet decision to finish. Later, he spent decades working for the Veterans Administration, helping other veterans navigate the system waiting for them after uniformed service ended. It was another kind of position, no machine gun, no muzzle flash, just patience, paperwork, and the knowledge that men who had survived war could still be defeated by indifference. He married, raised a family, lived most of his life near the same Pennsylvania coal country that had shaped him. His name was placed on buildings, roads, and veterans' facilities. But names on signs become invisible when people stop asking what they mean. Gino Merli's name means more than one night of gunfire. It means courage is not always forward motion. Sometimes courage attacks, sometimes it retreats, sometimes it carries a weapon through surf, and sometimes, with an enemy standing close enough to feel your breathing. Courage becomes the refusal to move at all. Gino survived because when every nerve screamed for action, he made stillness do the fighting.